All right. Hello and welcome everyone to today's video where we're going to be talking about why finding compassion for yourself before you try to change yourself is the most important thing you will ever do if you want to actually be able to make positive changes in your life. All right? So, this is one of those sneaky things where I think a lot of us think we're doing this and we think we're having compassion for ourselves, and we're learning how to recognize where we are going into self-improvement and fixing ourselves versus understanding why we are doing what we are doing and how we need to support ourselves in actually being able to change the way that we're doing things. Being able to recognize when we are in that is one of the most challenging things we will ever do, because we are so conditioned and so indoctrinated and so just kind of stuck in our childhood programming that when we are in pain and when we are struggling and when something hurts and when something isn't working in our lives, to go into fix it mode, to go into fix myself mode. And this, again, right, is totally innocent. It's totally natural at this point. Natural in the sense that most of us are doing it most of the time, not because we are choosing to, not because we have made a conscious choice that this is what we are going to do, that when I am in pain, I'm going to try to fix myself. That is clearly the answer. But because that, again, has been the narrative, and that's been what we were taught, and that's been what we were modeled, and that's the kind of, again, the perception and the conditioning that is so deep that we don't even see it as something that we could question or that might be shame and guilt, because it comes in so many different forms with so many different costumes, basically, that it can really feel like we're just taking responsibility for ourselves. It can really feel like we're just being honest with ourselves and being truthful and being in reality. And we are missing the foundation of why we are doing what we are doing, of what hurts, of what's really going on, and therefore we are not able to figure out what we actually need, what is actually going to feel better, and therefore all of the things that we do to try to fix ourselves, all the things that we do to try to change ourselves, never get us anywhere. Okay? If we are not able to really figure out why we are doing what we are doing, if we are not able to figure out the pain that we're in, that we're trying to escape from by doing the things that we are currently doing, if we are not able to figure out what we need and how what we are doing is currently meeting the needs we have to the best of our ability, to the best of our knowledge, if we are not able to figure out where our patterns came from and why we are doing what we are doing, we are not going to have a hope. We are not going to have a chance at figuring out a new way of doing things. No matter how hard we try, no matter how disciplined we are, no matter how much white knuckling and self-control we use, we are always going to go back to what we have been doing. And it's not because we're weak, and it's not because we're lazy. It's because the thing that we're doing right now is the best thing we know to do, to keep ourselves safe, to keep ourselves out of pain, to get ourselves what we need. Okay? That is the foundational, fundamental, bottom line understanding that we all need when we are approaching ourselves, looking at our behavior, and trying to figure out how to change what maybe isn't working. It's to understand that until we really get that what we are doing right now is not a bad habit, it's not something wrong with us, It's not a sign that we're weak, lazy, broken, bad, shameful, sinful, shitty. That is not ever why we are doing any of the things that we're doing. Right? We are doing what we are doing because it's the best way we know to keep ourselves safe. And it's the best way we know to get our needs met. Period. End of story. Every time. You listening. You are not the exception. Okay? Your bad habit. Your people pleasing. You're binging on Netflix. You're sabotaging every time you try to accomplish something. Your lack of discipline. The way that you won't speak up for yourself. The things you do to your body. Whatever it is, how you behave with your family. The walls you put up. The judgments you have for people. The patterns you have right now that you are telling yourself, if I could just get rid of this pattern, if I could just get rid of this behavior, if I could get rid of this coping mechanism, if I could get rid of this bad thing that I am doing, I would be happy, I would be healthy, I would be living my dream life. And it is this bad thing that is ruining everything. You listening to this, you are not the exception to what I'm about to say. That thing you are doing is meeting your needs. It is the best thing you have right now to meet your needs. That way that you are behaving, that thing you are doing, the coping mechanism, the way you are with other people, is how you are trying to get rid of pain. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not the one bad person who is doing the one bad thing, who just needs to get your shit together. You are not the exception to this rule. I promise you, you are not that special. You are just like the rest of us, who are doing what you are doing because you are trying to meet your needs in the best way you know how, and because you are trying to protect yourself in the best way you know how. Okay? And this is why I started doing one-on-one work. Because I know that our brains are so good at figuring out how we are the problem and at hearing messages like this and being like, but not me. My thing isn't like that. She doesn't know me. That's her story. Maybe that's true for her. Maybe that's true for other people. But that's not my thing. My situation is fine. My childhood was fine. My life is fine. I'm just shitty. I really am just doing this bad thing. And I really do just need to fix myself. Our brains are so good at going there that this is part of, like I said, why I started doing one-on-one coaching. Because a lot of the time, we do need someone to look us in the eye and say, yes, you, and then say your name, and then say your thing. This is how you are getting your needs met. This is how you are protecting yourself. This is the pain that you are in that is causing you to do this behavior. This is not a bad thing. This is not just the bad habit that is the problem, that if you got rid of it, everything would be perfect. Because, again, the reason our minds don't want to accept this, the reason our minds don't want to believe that the thing that we think is so bad and so wrong with us And the thing that we really believe, if we got rid of this thing, our lives would be perfect. Or if we changed it, or if we became this person we're supposed to become, that our lives would be perfect. The reason we don't want to let that go is because it opens us to the awareness and the reality that we are not in perfect control of our lives, that we are not in perfect control of other people, and that there isn't a way of perfecting ourselves, which is the thing we believe we have control over, that will then lead to us having a perfect life. We want to hold on to the belief that it is just this bad thing that I can just get rid of and then everything will be perfect, because that simplifies life, right? That boils our pain down to something that's our fault, which we then believe is in our control, and then if we fix it, we can have a perfect reality. So this idea when I come to you and say, no, that's not true, there's a deeper issue. There's a broader issue. There's an issue that has to do with how you're not getting your needs met in your family, or how you never did, or how you're not getting your needs met in your work, or how you never have, or how you feel insecure about this. And it's systemic, and there are more complicating factors than just changing the way that you behave. That makes it complicated. That makes it hard. That makes it having to accept things that we don't have control over and that we can't change. Right? So of course we don't want to accept that. Of course we don't want to go for that. And then second thing is that, again, this perception that it is my bad habits and my behavior and my bad things that I do that are causing the problem. This perception is so deeply rooted in our histories as a human being that it is really, really hard to break ourselves out of it. Because a lot of the time, the thing that is hurting us, that is causing us to do our bad behavior, the thing that is out of alignment, the thing that we are coping with, is normal to us. Right? We can't see, oh, the thing that's causing me harm is the way that my caregivers treat me. And that is why I am coping with every time I spend time with them, I do this behavior afterwards. We can't see it's because of the way caregivers are treating me. Because the way caregivers are treating me is how they have always treated me. That's just normal. That's what I'm supposed to expect. That's what I'm supposed to be okay with. I'm supposed to have love and compassion in my heart for the way that they are, and to feel totally close and connected with them. And if I don't, I'll get into examples in a second. But right, it can be really hard for us to take a step back and be like, maybe normal, maybe what I was raised to believe as being this is what normal is what's hurting me, causing me to not get my needs met, and is causing me to cope and numb and stimulate in all these different ways because it hurts and it doesn't feel good. But I have nothing to compare it to. I have no other way of looking at life and thinking it should be different. Right? Like, for an example, I grew up with the top part of my intestine shoved between two arteries so that my stomach never emptied properly when I ate. So I always felt like I was going to throw up after I ate for 35 years. It was painful to eat every single time. And then my colon didn't work, still doesn't, right? It caused all these downstream issues. And that was normal to me, right? I had nothing to compare it to. There was no time before this was how I felt when I ate. This was just always how I felt. So I thought That's how you're supposed to feel when you eat. I thought that's how everyone felt. I thought everyone was just dealing with the pain of eating better than me for my whole life. And it took a really long time for me to start to be like, oh, I'm in pain all the time. And hey, that's not normal. Because, right, part of the problem was growing up, I was telling my parents that I was in pain and I was throwing up all the time and things were bad. And rather than being treated, it got to the point where I started being treated like, you're just making it up. And you need to just deal with it. And you're too needy and you're all of these things. So I internalized all of that. And this is the same for most of us, is that we grew up in the families we grew up in. We got taught that this was what is normal. And there was no before. There was no perfect love. There was no actual safety. There was no time where we had a secure connection. And then something happened, and then there was something to compare it to. Most of us have never experienced what we need. We haven't experienced a safe environment. We haven't experienced a time before where what we were experiencing was healthy and good for us. So we can compare that to the thing that we're experiencing now, or that we've been experiencing for our whole lives, and say, this is why it's causing me pain. This is why it's hurting me. This is why I'm coping, numbing, and self-sabotaging, right? When a person with PTSD goes to war, and we know that they were like normal, healthy before they went, and they had a normal life, and they had normal psychology, and then they went and they experienced all of this very real, obvious trauma of watching people that they know get blown up or harmed, and their own lives just being in danger all the time. And then they come back and they have all these different symptoms. It's easy to be like, oh, okay. Right? There was a before. That was good. There was a very obvious thing that happened that was bad. And now you have these behaviors that we can be like, okay, yeah, it's not great that you sit in your garage all day and drink to self-medicate the pain. It's not great that every time you hear a firework, you literally go into a fit of rage because it reminds you of violence. But we can see that you're not broken. You're not a bad person. You're scared. You're scared because of a thing that happened to you. And then we can start to rehabilitate people based on getting their needs met now and helping them feel safe now and helping them bring their bodies out of that trauma state, right? Like, we can understand all of that. But when what we are dealing with, which is what most of us are dealing with, is there was no before time. There was no healthy time. There was no good time. We were raised in situations where we just did not get our needs met by our caregivers. And we learned to cope with that. And we learned to deal with that pain. And we learned to blame and shame and shit all over ourselves. And we learned all of these coping mechanisms because of that. We can't see that as being what's going on because we have nothing to compare it to. There is no healthy before to look at to say, oh, okay, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So that's why this work can be so hard. And that's why finding compassion for ourselves can be so hard. Because looking at our normal and being able to say, maybe my normal wasn't healthy. Maybe my normal was the problem, is really challenging. So like I said, That's why I have started doing one-on-one coaching so much, because a lot of the time we need an outside person to be like, okay, so you're describing to me what happened to you that's just normal to you. And you're off in fix myself land. And I'm slowing you down and being like, okay, but how did that actually feel when you experienced that? What hurt about that? When you were in your normal, how did that actually feel? Were you able to be in your body? Did it feel good? Did it feel supportive? Did you feel safe? Did you feel like you could just be yourself and express yourself and grow? Or did you feel scared all the time? Did you feel like you were being abandoned? Did you feel like your needs weren't being met? Did you feel these negative things that, again, was just normal to you, and then you went into self-help as a child before you could even register, I'm in pain, this is why I'm in pain, this is what my need is, this is how I'm not getting my needs met, because we couldn't do that as children. We weren't aware of what our needs were. We didn't realize that caregivers could be bad at meeting our needs. It was just normal to us. So the only option we had was to cope, was to numb, was to stimulate ourselves, was to change ourselves and suppress ourselves and do all of these things to try to get the safety, to try to get the love, to try to get the security we needed. And now we're still doing it as an adult. And we've never been able to stop and say, whoa, okay, maybe the reason I'm doing this isn't because I'm bad, wrong, shameful, or broken, but because what was normal for me wasn't healthy. Right? Most of us grew up in families where there wasn't overt abuse. Many of us look at our childhoods and think it was fine. There are a lot of people that I coach with, honestly, who come to me and have had horrible things happen to them. Like pretty objectively horrible. And they still were like, it wasn't that bad, it was fine. Because again, that's what we have to do. We have to normalize our experience. We normalize it, and then we look at our reaction and our response to it as being the problem. Instead of being able to say, oh, what I went through was the thing that hurt me. I'm not getting my needs met, and this is how I cope. Okay? This can be a really, really hard thing to wrap our minds around. And this is why I make video after video after video after video about this. Because for so many of us, we need to hear this over and over and over again before it's going to land for us. And we need to hear it in a bunch of different ways before it's going to land. Before we're going to even be able to recognize that we're not doing this. Right? So as much as this is a challenge, again, I really want to challenge you. That bad thing you want to change about yourself. You listening to this. The way that you judge and shut down around your family, as an instance. The way that you are a people pleaser and you can't put up boundaries. The way that you come home from work and binge on Netflix or play video games or eat a bunch of junk food instead of trying to do your goals and all of these things. The ways that you chronically sabotage yourself. Right? You want to do something in your career. You want to change your career. You want to learn something. You want to grow. But you can't ever seem to get the discipline to actually do it. That thing that you think is wrong with you. The way that you nitpick your body. And you really believe if I were to just lose the weight or build the butt or change my face, everything would be better. The way you believe if you could just get the perfect relationship, if you could just manifest that love of your life and have that partner, it would fix everything. Whatever it is that you think is the problem with you, your favorite coping mechanism, the way that you numb out of reality, you listening to this, right here, right now, listen to me. You are doing it for a good reason. You are not the exception to this rule. The answer is not get rid of that habit and then you will be happy. Just change to be this ideal version of yourself who's able to be open and loving and caring with your family. This ideal version of yourself who doesn't have your coping mechanism anymore, who comes home at the end of work and is just hyper productive for the whole rest of the night. This version of you that never daydreams ever again. That version of you would not be happier. That version of you would not be getting what you want. If we were to just come into your life right now and do something to make it impossible for you to use your coping mechanism, or if someone came to work with you every single day and knew when you were doing your people-pleasing behavior and they were like, no, you have to stand up for yourself. Be honest. Say the thing you really want. Say what you really mean. And they forced you to do it. If I could wave a magic wand in your life right now and take away your bad habit and make you the perfect person that you think you need to be right now, I guarantee you, you would be less happy. I guarantee you, you would be less happy than you are right now. Because what would actually happen is that the pain that you're in, that your coping mechanism, your self-sabotage, your habit is protecting you from, would come full force into your reality. That's why you do it. Because it numbs pain. It takes pain away that you know no other way to deal with. It is meeting a need for you that you have no other way of meeting right now. So you would not be happier. You would be in more pain. And rather than getting a need met at least partially, even if there are negative consequences, you would now be not getting that need met at all. You would go and hang out with your family and have your big open heart and no judgment towards them, and you'd be letting them do how they want, and they would still not be able to meet your needs for connection. You would walk in there, big open heart, and they would do the things that they do that hurt you, and you would have no protection. You would just be taking arrows, and you would be in massive amounts of pain. If I said, okay, you are no longer to do any people-pleasing behavior, you have to just be totally honest, you would be locked in fear. You would be a ball of anxiety who probably couldn't do anything. You would be terrified. If I took away your ability to cope and numb, you would not then become just super productive. You would realize how overwhelmed you are, how stressed you are, how sad you are, how angry you are, how anxious you are. And you would have nothing to blunt those emotions. You would just be sitting in your terrible emotion, and you would probably not be motivated to go and do a bunch of stuff. You'd probably just be locked in your terrible emotions. That's what would actually happen. That is the reality. You would be in pain all the time. You would not be motivated to go live a better life. You might not even understand what you need or what you want, and therefore you wouldn't be able to get those needs or wants met. You would just know that you don't feel good. And this is why when we try to change ourselves, before we take this compassion step, we never figure out how what we're doing right now is serving us. We never figure out how it's helping us. We never figure out how it is keeping us safe right now. So then when we try to change it and we try to do something different, we feel good for a little bit because there's that feeling of I'm doing something, I'm changing something, I'm being a better person. There's the novelty. But eventually we get to a place where we can't sustain our new behavior. We can't keep up with being productive after we come home after work and not doing our self-sabotaging behavior. We can't keep up with being open with our family. We can't keep up. We go back into judgment. We do all of these things. And we think, oh man, I suck and I failed. Instead of being able to say, no, I actually feel better when I do those things. Because when I don't do those things, I'm not getting my needs met at all. When I don't do those things, I'm in more pain. It doesn't feel good. I don't feel hyper productive and amazing when I don't eat junk food. I feel this heavy pit of anxiety in my chest and I don't know what to do, and I get overwhelmed by all the things in my life and all the things that I want to do and I don't know how to do them, and I feel scared and I get all messed up in what steps I'm supposed to take and what I'm supposed to do, and that's how I actually feel. You see? You take away my whatever it is that I do. Binging on Netflix, checking out with daydreaming, checking out with eating. You take that away, and I'm just left with this overwhelming, paralyzing sense of being alone and not having what I need and not being loved and not being safe. It's not that I take away the behavior and then everything's great. I take away the behavior and I feel awful. That's the reality. And so because that is the reality, this is why compassion for whatever our bad habit is the first step. That's why we don't go into, this is the bad thing that's wrong with me that I need to fix and change. Because it's not. It's not the bad thing that's wrong with you. This is why we have to go, why am I doing this? From a place of love and compassion. So when I go to my family and I put up all my walls and I judge them, what is the positive intention behind that? How is that helping me feel safe? Yes, maybe compassion is to be more sensitive towards myself. Exactly that. You are doing it for a good reason. Your family doesn't meet your needs. Your family makes you feel antagonized. Your family doesn't give you the loving connection that you want. And if you go in there full open heart, you get disappointed. You get let down. You get hurt. So right now, the best way you know to deal with that is to protect yourself by putting up a wall and judging. That's what's really going on. It's not that if you just put your heart on the table, it's this perfect family where you get perfect love. Because if it was, you wouldn't have started defending yourself in the first place. Right? A lot of us don't see that our bad behavior came from somewhere. That if we really grew up in an environment that was actually safe for us, where our needs were actually met, we never would have developed these habits in the first place. You didn't just develop your habit in order to fuck with yourself. You don't have your coping, numbings, and self-sabotage because you just wanted a shitty life. You're doing it because the alternative was more painful. You're doing it because the alternative was worse. We are all still thinking, I'm doing this for no reason. And that what I grew up in and what I have is fine. The alternative is better. And I just have this bad habit for no reason. Instead of being able to be like, no, this shitty thing that I'm doing that I think is wrong with me is the better of the two options I had. So yes, now as an adult, I have more autonomy. I have more capacity to defend myself, to create healthy boundaries, to ask for my needs, to figure out what I want and what I need, to build a different life for myself. That is true. But as a child, I did not. Where I learned how to cope, numb, self-sabotage, put up walls, where these things came from, my two options were develop this coping mechanism, which at least blunts the pain to a degree, which at least gets my needs met to a degree, or be in pain and don't get my needs met. Those were your two options. So everyone watching this, I want you to look at your bad behaviors, the things you think are wrong with you, the things you're trying to take responsibility for, the ways that you judge, the ways that you cope, the ways that you stimulate yourself, the ways you numb yourself, the ways you people please. And I want you to really think, I developed this habit in a time where my only option was to develop this habit or be in more pain. I developed this habit because at the time, the only option was to develop this habit or not get my needs met at all. So even if you're like, well, I drink alcohol now, I didn't develop that as a habit as a child. I would say, okay, go back. Where did you learn that checking out of your body and checking out of your emotions was what you needed to do to feel good? Because I guarantee you, if you felt good and safe in your family, if you felt good and safe at school and in social situations, if you felt good doing the things you were pursuing in your career and all this stuff, you wouldn't have needed substance to make it feel better. It just would have felt good. You never would have learned anywhere in there that I need to alter my physiology to get through this. And rather than seeing it that way, right? The shame is always so deep that we think, well, I was supposed to feel good. I was supposed to be able to handle it. I should have been strong enough. My family was loving. What's wrong with me that I didn't feel good there? I had a good education. What was wrong with me that I couldn't fit in? Instead of being like, no, I was in pain. And I developed my self-sabotage. I developed my people-pleasing. I developed my whatever as a way of trying to help myself feel better in these circumstances in which I did not feel good. I did not feel safe. I was not getting my needs met. That's the real reality. That is why you do everything you do. And this is why I say we have to find that compassion for ourselves before we try to change ourselves. Because if we don't even know why we're doing what we're doing and how it's meeting a need and how it's protecting us from pain and where that pain is coming from, how are we going to figure out what we need to do for ourselves to replace the behavior we're doing now with something that meets our needs better? How are we going to replace the behavior we're doing now with boundaries, with asking for our needs to get met? How are we going to replace the things we're doing now by getting rid of the pain we're still in based on circumstances that are normal but painful for us? If we don't change the pain, right? If your hand is on a burner and you were raised to believe we're supposed to live with our hands on a burner, that's just what everybody does. That's normal. And there's something wrong with me that I can't cope with this pain. So now I'm constantly taking painkillers and I'm addicted to painkillers. And this is what's bad about me. And if I could just stop taking my painkiller, I would be so much better. It's hard to be like, no, if I stop taking my painkiller, I'm in more pain. And then it's even harder to be like, I'm in pain because my hand is on a burner and I need to take it off, because everyone I know also lives with their hand on a burner. And everyone I know in the wellness industry is telling me, I don't have painkillers. I perfected my mind to a point where I can just be happy with my hand on a burner, right? I fixed myself so much that I can be around my family and they can do whatever they want and it doesn't hurt me. I fixed myself so much that when I get triggered, I just love myself and I never have a negative emotion. And it's bullshit. I guarantee you that is not true. Everyone out there who still has their hand on a burner is coping with it in some way, is numbing in some way, is self-sabotaging in some way to deal with that pain. And if they really have gotten to a point where they don't feel pain anymore, it's because they changed something. They took their hand off the burner. Right? Like, so for me, a big part of my healing was no more talking to my family for a while. I had to cut contact with my caregivers for a few years so that I could be angry with them and I could start to figure out what was their expectation of me versus who I actually am. So I could start to figure out how they had tricked me into believing there was something wrong with me when really I was in pain and I wasn't getting my needs met. How they had shamed me for the needs that I had and told me it was wrong and bad and not how I should be. And then I had to learn how to get those needs met anyways, how to embrace these things about myself, how to create a life that worked for me that had nothing to do with them. And then all of a sudden, all of these bad habits and coping mechanisms of overextending myself because I wanted love, and that was the only way I learned how to get love, was to give and give and give and give and give and hope that someone would notice me, and they usually wouldn't, and then I would burn myself out, and I was in this constant spiral until I learned how to say, whoa, okay, I need attention. I need love. I need to be able to figure out where I need a hug or I need someone to just sit and talk with me. Instead of feeling those feelings of being neglected and looking for someone to help, hoping that they would notice me afterwards. And when I learned how to do that, then all of a sudden I didn't need to learn how to, put up boundaries. That became natural. I could start to tell when I was overdoing it, and I was able to say no. Because I was able to see, oh, I have needs, and I'm allowed to have needs. Right? That was an indoctrination in my childhood that I thought was normal. You're not allowed to have needs. You're not supposed to be a human. You're supposed to be a giver and a giver and a giver, and you're supposed to be for everyone else, and any inconvenience you cause is the worst thing ever. I had to unlearn that. So I didn't just learn to be okay with my family, because so much of what they were doing was not okay. I had to change. I had to change a lot. I had to create a different life for myself. And now I can be around my family. And I don't expect them to love me. I don't expect them to see me and to understand me and to get me. Because I know how to get those things for myself. I don't go to my family and just bear all. I learned that that's not a safe thing to do. Right? So it wasn't that I was judgmental towards them. It was they have a limited capacity to love me. And they do their best. And I had to get to a point where I could get my needs met without them. Where I was no longer looking to them for that approval. I had to grow out of that first before I could have an open-hearted relationship with them now. And that was hard and that was painful, right? Learning to let that go, learning to let go of wanting your caregivers to see you and love you for who you are is hard. And it took a long time and it was really painful. And I cried a lot. But the thing that fixed it wasn't me just being okay with how they are. I had to figure out where they had failed to meet my needs. I had to figure out how to meet those needs for myself. I had to change my whole life to be something that worked for me, even though it wasn't what they taught me to do. And in many ways, it was a lot of things that they disapproved of and still do. And I had to learn to let go of looking for them to approve of me and to find that love somewhere else. And then it stopped hurting. And then I could find new ways of getting my needs met and needing less self-sabotage, less coping, less numbing, less of these bad behaviors that I was using. And then I naturally, again, had less self-hate all of a sudden. I don't have to fight with myself to like myself. I created a life where I'm safe with me. So now I'm not in this existential battle with myself, trying to become what my caregivers wanted me to be, so that I will be loved by them. Right? All the parts of myself that I hated were the parts of myself that they hated. So in order to learn to love those parts, I had to let go of wanting them to love them. Wanting them to give me permission to be the person that I am. Wanting them to make space for me. They couldn't. I had to do it for myself as an adult. So that's why I'm saying, as an adult, you can learn to get your needs met. You can learn to set up a life that works for you, to set boundaries with your caregivers, to move away from that. I am first to love part of my body. See, again, why do you not love it? Where did you get trained that this part of your body separates you from the love of your caregivers, or separates you from the love of others, separates you from provision, separates you from safety? And how can you start to see that that is not reality? Right? All of these parts of ourselves that we think are bad and wrong are the parts of ourselves that we perceive are separating us from safety and provision. And that's usually not really true. They are actually helping us to cope with the things that separated us from safety and provision. What do you actually want? We must seek the source of the unreal thought. That is the only way. There is no other way. Anything that you hate about yourself is an unreal thought. Any behavior you are doing right now that you are judging is an unreal thought. Put it that way. Anything that you are trying to spiritualize out of yourself is an unreal thought. It's not true. You're doing it for a good reason. It's helping you on some level. It's serving you on some level. It's protecting you from pain. It's getting a need met. And unless and until you understand that, you can't change your life enough to get your needs met, to make yourself safe, to process the grief you've been through, to then make the changes where you don't need that thing anymore. So it's not about saying you have to accept that you're going to binge on Netflix for the rest of your life. But the only way you're going to change that is by figuring out what's the pain that drives you to do that. What is the pain that is driving you to do that? What is the need that this meets that you know no other way to meet? And then how can you start to address that actual pain? Setting boundaries, learning to say no, processing the grief of the things that you've been through, crying, getting angry, setting boundaries, cutting people out of your life for a little while, getting therapy, all of these things. To process that pain, to figure out why it hurts, to figure out what hurts about it, and to figure out what you need to change about that circumstance so that you're no longer being exposed to that pain. Because again, so long as your hand is on the burner, there is no transcending it. You're not going to spiritualize your way out of it. You're not going to thought work your way out of it. You're not going to discipline your way out of it. So long as your hand is on the burner, you are going to use your coping mechanism. So you need to keep thinking of it that way. If you keep thinking, my life is fine now, why am I still doing this? No, it isn't. If you didn't still have pain, you would not be using your coping mechanisms anymore. If your needs were being met, you would not be using your coping mechanisms anymore. Period, end of story. So if the coping mechanism is still there, the need is not being met. If the coping mechanism is still there, the pain is still there. And you're not going to positive think your way out of it. You're not going to spiritualize your way out of it. You need to figure out where the pain is coming from. And that's by looking at what is normal to you and saying, does this hurt? Does this actually feel good for me? All of these things I think are wrong with me that I need to fix about myself. Where did I learn that that separates me from love and therefore makes me unsafe? And how can I start to see that I can be safe and be this way? Even if other people don't like me and even if other people reject me and all these things. It's deep and it's different for all of us in what we need to do and how we need to approach it. And that's why I do the one-on-one coaching, because it can be really hard to figure this out. But you can figure it out if you are willing to be open to compassion for yourself first, and to assume every single time you do what you do, it's because you were in pain and you knew no other way to get out of that pain, and you need to look at where that pain is coming from and what it is and what you need to help you process it or change things or get through it, or it's meeting a need on some level that you need to figure out what your need is and how this is helping you feel better. And then eventually, how can I get this need met in a new and a different way? How can I get this same need met with behaviors that are less harmful? That's always going to be what it is. You're not going to just spiritualize your way into being okay with your hand on a burner. You're not going to self-help your way into no longer having the needs that you have. There is no spiritual answer for getting rid of parts of yourself that you've had to suppress and deny to be safe with your family or safe with your friends or safe in your culture. You're not going to get rid of yourself. You're not going to convince yourself that you're safe when you don't feel safe. You're not going to convince yourself that you feel good in a place you don't feel good. And you're coping and you're numbing and you're self-sabotaging and you're doing what you're doing because you don't feel good. That is the bottom line. It's the way you're trying to make yourself feel better. So until you figure that out, nothing will be able to change. Okay? You are not the exception. Your thing that you want to get rid of and fix and change about yourself is not the exception. You're doing it because it's protecting you from pain and it's meeting a need you know no other way to meet. So you must start with compassion if you're going to figure out how to change it. Okay? Any comments, questions, concerns before we end? I'd love to have you in the mystery school. I'd love to have you one-on-one coaching if any of those things call to you. If not, I have so many videos and so many programs and so many blogs that I hope will be supportive for you in realizing that there's nothing wrong with you. You're just trying to get your needs met. You're just trying to keep yourself safe. So we must start with compassion if we are going to change anything. Okay? Okay. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. You are not the exception. And I will see you in the next video. And until then, have a great week, have a great month, have a great day. Whenever I see you again, Goodbye.